The stadium roars, the crowd loses its mind, and somewhere across town you're sitting in a coffee shop, reading a book completely unbothered while your phone buzzes with game updates you didn't ask for. People assume something is off with you. They think you're cold or antisocial or secretly hiding some buried trauma from getting picked last in gym class. But the truth is, people who don't care about sports aren't broken or detached. They're wired differently in ways that psychology has been quietly documenting for years. This video is about the psychology of people who genuinely do not care about sports, and by the end, you're going to understand exactly what's actually going on beneath the surface. Welcome back to the Mind Lab. Let's break this down. There's a cultural script most of us absorb before we're old enough to question it. Sports matter. Sports mean belonging. To opt out of that script is to invite confusion, suspicion, even mild social hostility. But the people who opt out aren't doing something wrong. They're doing something consistent with a specific psychological architecture that shapes how they process reward, identity, and social connection. Let's start with something fundamental. People who don't care about sports tend to score differently on a trait called need for affiliation through shared ritual. This is the psychological drive to bond with others through synchronized, collective experiences, chanting the same chant, wearing the same colors, feeling the same surge of elation or defeat at exactly the same moment. Research by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt on collective effervescence shows that this synchronized emotional experience literally produces feelings of transcendence and unity. For many people, sports fandom is one of the easiest delivery mechanisms for that feeling. But here's what matters: not everyone has the same baseline intensity for that drive. Some people get that hit of collective belonging through music or activism or shared creative work or religious practice. The drive isn't absent. The channel is simply different. Now consider how identity functions for someone who doesn't care about sports. Most fans describe their team allegiance as genuinely part of who they are. Psychologists call this birging, basking in reflected glory, a term coined by Robert Cialdini in his foundational research on self-esteem and group association. When your team wins, you win. Your self-worth gets a temporary, measurable boost from an outcome you had no hand in producing. For people who don't care about sports, this psychological mechanism simply doesn't activate. Their self-concept is organized differently, usually around personal competence, individual creative output, or internal values rather than tribal membership. That's not emotional immaturity. That's a different architecture for self-esteem maintenance. Here's where it gets more interesting. People who are disengaged from sports frequently show heightened sensitivity to what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, the internal drive to pursue something for its own inherent meaning rather than for external validation or social signaling. When you genuinely don't understand why watching other people compete is supposed to feel meaningful to you, it's often because your reward system is calibrated toward personal mastery, not vicarious victory. You're not watching the race. You want to run it or build the engine or write the story about what it means to finish. The applause from the stands simply doesn't register as a reward worth seeking. This connects directly to another observable pattern. People who don't care about sports often feel a quiet, persistent discomfort in conversations where sports fandom is the assumed common ground. It's not shyness. It's a specific experience of cognitive mismatch, the feeling of being handed a cultural script you didn't memorize and being expected to perform it fluently on the spot. Social psychologists describe this as a failure of assumed common knowledge, where the default shared reference point of a group simply doesn't exist in your frame. You're not being cold. You're being honest. You just don't have the map everyone else seems to be using. It's also worth naming this directly. People who don't care about sports are disproportionately likely to be high in a trait called openness to experience, one of the big 5 personality dimensions, characterized by intellectual curiosity, aesthetic sensitivity, and a preference for novelty over routine. Sports, by structural design, repeat themselves. The season ends and another begins. The same emotional arcs unfold with slightly different players. For a mind that hungers for new patterns and unconventional thinking, that repetition doesn't feel comforting. It feels like going through a door you've already been through. Now let's talk about why this exists in the first place, because the roots of this go back much further than personality. Developmental psychologists have observed that a child's relationship with sports fandom is almost always shaped by what happened in the first years of emotional bonding with caregivers. For many children, sports is the language through which a parent becomes fully present, excited, animated, warm, available. The child learns to associate fandom with connection. They internalize the interest not purely because they chose it, but because it opened a door to someone they loved. For children whose primary emotional bonds were built around something else, books, music, art, nature, conversation, the sports channel simply never gets wired as a pathway to intimacy. By adolescence, when peer pressure to perform sports knowledge intensifies, those children are already operating with a different emotional vocabulary. They haven't rejected sports. They were never handed that key in the first place. The indifference isn't a refusal. It's an absence. And absences don't require justification. So where does that leave you? There's nothing wrong with you. That deserves to be said plainly and without qualification. Not caring about sports is not a social deficiency, not an emotional limitation, not evidence of some unresolved psychological wound. It is a legitimate psychological orientation, shaped by your development, your personality architecture, and the reward systems your brain built in response to your earliest experiences of meaning and connection. The practice worth embracing is this: stop performing the apology. Many people who don't care about sports have developed a reflexive habit of softening their disinterest, hedging it, dressing it up so it doesn't inconvenience whoever they are talking to. Notice when you do that. You are allowed to simply say without apology that sports don't speak to you, in the same easy, unbothered tone that a sports fan might say they've never been to an art gallery and feel fine about it. The second practice is to invest deliberately in the communities that do give you that sense of collective meaning. The research on belonging is clear. The need is real and it doesn't disappear because sports don't satisfy it. Find your effervescence. Find the room where the chanting makes sense to you, even if that chant is a standing ovation at a concert, or a late-night conversation that runs until 2 in the morning, or a group of people who care as intensely about the thing you care about as sports fans care about their team. Not every soul is built for the stadium. Some are built for the library, the lab, the studio, or the mountain. If you recognized yourself in this video, leave a comment. I'd genuinely love to know what you do care about with that kind of intensity. If someone in your life fits this description and you've never quite understood them, share this with them. It might open a conversation you didn't know you were both ready to have. Thank you for spending this time exploring the mind with me. If you want to keep walking through ideas like this one, subscribe. We're just getting started. Until next time.